Hey there guys, John here, and I'm finally here. I know I'm about a day late. I'm finally here to give my review for Captain America Civil War. Now, I have actually had the privilege of seeing the movie twice. I saw it last week with a bunch of other critics, and then I got to go to the world premiere the other night, and I wanted to give you my thoughts. Now, first of all, before I give you my thoughts, Captain America Civil War, I've got to refresh your memory. To me, the greatest comic book movie of all time is The Avengers. And then when I went in to see the Russo brothers' first Captain America film, Winter Soldier, I came out of Winter Soldier with my mind blown. Like, I could not believe you could make a comic book movie like that. The Russo brothers claimed that Winter Soldier was like a 70s political thriller, and it really was. And I just the way they were able to blend genres in with the comic book genre was so impressive, and it just blew me away. And I absolutely loved Winter Soldier. To me, it became either my number 2 or number 3 favorite comic book movie of all time, like right on par with The Dark Knight, with Avengers still being the number 1 film for me. Went into Captain America Civil War. Now, I'm not one of those people that I need each new movie to be better than the last. No, I don't need that. I remember going into Civil War thinking, as long as Civil War even gets close to how good Winter Soldier was, I'm going to walk out really damn happy. Well, let's just put it this way. I walked out more than really damn happy. I am still not sure whether I like Winter Soldier or Civil War more, because you got to remember how much I loved Civil War. You have to remember how much Winter Soldier, I should say, how much Winter Soldier blew me away. You just got to remember that. And so for me to say, I think Civil War is pretty much right on par with Winter Soldier is one of the highest compliments I can possibly give it. First of all, one of my fears going into Civil War, and you might remember this, was after seeing the D23 footage months and months and months ago, me and a bunch of other people were kind of worried that this wasn't going to be Civil War. It was going to be more like Civil Dispute, because we saw footage of a fight going on and they were still exchanging quippy yet kind of friendly lines to each other. Like Widow and Hawkeye are fighting and Widow's like, we're still friends, right? You know, stuff like that. And I started to kind of feel like the stakes weren't that high. But believe me when I tell you, Civil War delivers war. It is fantastic. I'm going to start with the action because that seems to be what a lot of the people are leading off with. The action in this film is absolutely unbelievable, okay? You've seen a lot of people talking online about how this airport fight, the scene that we see in a lot of the trailers, could be the greatest action film fight sequence in any comic book movie ever. I'll go one step further. It might be the greatest fight sequence in any movie, anytime ever, of any genre. Like, you just, by the time that sequence is over, and it's a good 15 to 17 minutes long, you find yourself taking breath because you realize you've been holding your breath for 17 minutes because you're on the edge of your seat, holding on your seat, and all this amazing, wonderful action, cool things, and great one-liners are being thrown in there at the same time. It's absolutely outstanding. Listen, everything you've heard about that fight scene is absolutely true. And everybody is in the fight scene. Everybody who's in the movie is in the fight scene at any rate. So you have Iron Man, Widow, War Machine, Vision, the Spider-Man is in that fight scene, Black Panther's in that fight scene, Captain America, Ant-Man, Falcon, Winter Soldier, Scarlet Witch, they're all in the fight scene. It's this one big epic battle that goes on for like 15, 16, 17 minutes. Boom, blows your mind. But lest you think that's the only good action scene in the film, the movie opens up with, you've also seen parts of this in the trailers as well, with Captain America going up against Crossbones and some of his dudes in a town. That action scene is fantastic, and that's just the appetizer. That you watch that action scene at the beginning of the movie, you're going, how can it get better than this? And it's just the appetizer. Then what you've also seen in the trailers is the fight scene between Captain America, Bucky, and Iron Man. Amazing fight scene filled with emotional drama, and you buy into it. You've often heard me say this. Action in a movie without purpose, without dramatic purpose, is just visual noise. Action without dramatic purpose is just visual noise. And believe me when I tell you, not only is all the action in this movie fantastic, each action sequence carries with it its own dramatic element and purpose. You know why these fights are happening, and you know what is at stake for each of these characters, and it just sells it completely. But much like Winter Soldier, Civil War is more than just a popcorn comic book movie action film. There's depth and drama and struggle and conflict that goes on. And of course, what else would you expect from a movie called Civil War? But you find yourself as an audience member torn between the two sides, between Iron Man's side and Captain America's side. And really, it's not Iron Man and Captain America. They just become the symbolization, if you will, of the opposing philosophical sides. The whole premise of the movie is based on the fact that the United Nations is now afraid of the Avengers. Because every time the Avengers get involved with something, terrible things happen. And we all, of course, remember the events of Age of Ultron, where Sokovia was just demolished. So the basis of the movie is that the United Nations have come together and drafted something called the Sokovia Accords. Now, this is where the movie Civil War differs from the comic book series Civil War. Because remember, the comic Civil War all revolved around the notion that superheroes should reveal their secret identities. That's not an issue here in this movie. This is about that the United Nations wants the Avengers to sign off on this accord that says the Avengers will only act when the UN Security Council sends them into action and will not go into action without the approval of this specific Security Council that the United Nations is putting together. Now, you got people on Tony Stark's side who, Tony Stark and his kind of group of people, they believe that the Avengers need this. They need to be kept in check. They need to have their power, have a check and balance with it with the United Nations. Now, on the other side, you got Captain America, where Captain America has been following orders his whole life. And in Captain America Winter Soldier, we see the consequences of him following. He realizes that this organization he's been serving has actually been Hydra. That by trusting authority, he was used as an instrument to do wrong things. And now he has trust issues, and he believes that the safest place for responsibilities is in their own hands. So it starts this schism and this rift. And then you get a villain, Baron Zemo gets involved to mix up the pot a little bit. Black Panther gets involved. Spider-Man gets involved. Boom, boom, boom. Anyway, it's not just a great action fun flick. There's dramatic tension and purpose throughout, and you understand all the different characters' reasons. And there's a bunch of little subplots that run in there too that fall in line and are in harmony with the main dramatic points. There's a great little storyline that goes on with Wanda, Scarlet Witch. With Wanda and Vision and her place in all of this. There's a nice little storyline for Spider-Man. There's a nice little story. There's a great little subplot going on there with Black Panther. It's just with Bucky, it's a great continuation. This is a true sequel to Winter Soldier. Now, a lot of people have asked, and you might have heard me mention this before, seen it on my Twitter, that, look, with all these Avengers characters in it, I mean, it's got all the Avengers except for Thor and Hulk. Is this really, Avengers 2.5 as opposed to Captain America Civil War? No, it's not. This is absolutely a Captain America movie. This is absolutely the true sequel to Captain America Winter Soldier. Captain America Civil War just works on all of those levels. Fun, funny. Got to mention Paul Rudd. I mean, Ant-Man is not in a lot of this movie, but what he is in this movie, he's great, both visually and in action, and completely in the spirit of his character from the original Ant-Man movie. Paul Rudd is hilarious in this. Boseman, man, you got Boseman is Black Panther. I've always said there's 100 different people that could play a role and play it great and perfectly. Well, Boseman is pretty much as perfect as it gets playing Black Panther. If you had any doubts about Boseman playing Black Panther, they'll be gone by the end of this movie. And you'll come out of this movie itching to see a standalone Black Panther movie. They do that so well. The new Spider-Man came across as great. I've said this in my Twitter. I'll say it again here. Don't expect too much out of Spider-Man. He's only in 2 scenes. But oh my God, those 2 scenes are incredible. And he's used so great and so wonderful. Tony is wonderful. Chris Evans, I mean, this dude, the more and more I see him as Captain America, the more and more I really think this guy was born to play Captain America. I mean, so he's just incredible in it. Scarlett Johansson is great as always. I can't think of a single weak performance in this movie. It is spectacular. But it's not a perfect movie. And the one big glaring weakness in this movie, and all the little nitpicky things I could pick out about Captain America Civil War, all come back to the one thing really. And that's, once again, and this has kind of become a pattern for Marvel, that if you can go through all the Marvel films, you know how much I like almost all the Marvel films. One constant seems to keep popping up as a weakness in their films: the villain. Zemo, and he's not Baron Zemo in this movie, by the way, but Zemo is useless. Completely useless in this movie. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with the performance that Daniel Bruhl brought to Zemo. No. Actually, he's a great actor, and he brought as much of that character as could be brought. But the character was completely inconsequential and weak, and he wasn't needed. Now, some people will argue that Zemo in this movie is a plot device to move the story along, but I would argue that there is so much inherent conflict in this movie as it is without Zemo that you didn't need Zemo to move the conflict along. And then I would say, if you feel like you have to use Zemo as a villain and as a antagonist in this movie, at least make his evil plan make sense. His plan made no sense. His plan made no sense. And you had to take such giant leaps of suspended disbelief throughout the entire film because of Zemo. Now, granted, and thankfully, Zemo's not in a lot of the film, so that's a minor point. But if I'm going to try to be honest and be objective about it, then I got to say that the villain is once again in a Marvel film the big glaring weakness. But everything else is so good, and there's so much inherent conflict in everything else, you didn't need him. But that aside, even with a bad villain, this movie is nothing short of spectacular. For me, it is now my number 3, just by a hair under Winter Soldier. And if you ask me again in a month, I might even put it above Winter Soldier. But for now, I will say just a hair below Winter Soldier. It is my number 3 all-time favorite Marvel film. Now, remember, you know how much I love Guardians of the Galaxy, and how much I loved Ant-Man, and how much I love the first Iron Man, and how much I love the first Thor movie directed by Kenneth Branagh. You know how much I love all those movies. And I'm telling you, in my opinion, Winter Soldier or Civil War is better than all of those. Civil War is better than Thor. It's better than Guardians of the Galaxy. It's better than Ant-Man. And you know how much I love those movies. And I'm saying, in my personal opinion, that this is even better than those films. I think you will love it. Now, I'm going to do something that I don't normally do for reviews. I put out a tweet saying, hey guys, do you have any specific questions, non-spoiler, do you have any specific questions about Captain America Civil War that you'd like me to answer in my review? And I'm going to do that right now. I took tons of you guys sent in questions, but I'm going to take just these couple. This one comes from King Swoosh, and he asks, John, would you say after Civil War, Captain America has the best trilogy of superhero movies since Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy? Absolutely, I'll say it is the best trilogy. It's certainly better than the Iron Man trilogy. Because the first Iron Man is spectacular, but the other two, and I like Iron Man 3. I like Iron Man 3. I didn't love it, and I don't think I liked Iron Man 2 at all. But, so it's definitely better than the Iron Man trilogy. It is definitely the best since the Dark Knight. I might even have it on par with the Dark Knight trilogy. Because remember, I think the Dark Knight trilogy ended weakly. I didn't think the Dark Knight, I can't remember the name of the last one, whatever the Dark Knight was. I didn't even think the third Christopher Nolan Batman film was all that great. I thought it was okay. I liked it. But the third Captain America movie is gangbusters awesome. Like, the third Captain America movie beats the hell out of the third Batman movie. I think the second Batman movie and the second Captain America Winter Soldier movie are real close. I'll give an edge to the Dark Knight, but I think those two movies are really, really close. And then I think the first Batman movie, Batman Begins, is a little bit better than the first Captain America, the first Avengers movie. So part 1, give the edge to Batman. Part 2, give a slight edge to Batman. Part 3, Captain America beats the hell out of the third Batman movie. So it's close. Overall, it's close, but I will say it is definitely the best since the Batman trilogy. Might even be as good as the Batman trilogy, but that's up for you to decide. Next Twitter question comes from Stormy2K, who writes, who was a better villain, Crossbones or Zemo? Neither of them were very good, although Crossbones is only in it for one scene, and Crossbones is pretty badass, the scene he's in, so I'm actually going to give the edge to Crossbones as the better villain, as probably the best villain in Captain America Civil War. All right, next question comes from Danny94. He writes, John, did Spider-Man still look as rubbery and patterned condom-like when mixed in with the other heroes, or did he really fit in? Yeah, I'm still not thrilled with the look of Spider-Man. He still looked like a Spider-Man pattern condom, kind of rubbery and whatever. But it doesn't matter because he's so good in the movie and the character is used so well in the movie that, yeah, okay, I don't like the look of it. But who cares? Who cares? Ultimately, the look of the costume doesn't ultimately mean that much. It's just a side note. Whether you like or don't like the costume is a side note. The important thing here is the character is used great and he's wonderful. But if you're just going to ask me, am I thrilled with the costume look? No, I'm still not thrilled with the costume look, but ultimately that doesn't hinder or hurt my enjoyment of the character in the film because he is used amazingly. Amazingly. All right, next question. John, everyone seems to only really, this comes from C. Carr, and C. Carr writes, John, everybody seems to only really be talking about the airport fight scene. Are there other memorable fight scenes throughout the film? Yeah, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the opening action sequence when it's the Avengers against Crossbones crew, that's great. The ending, the big massive end fight between Bucky, Captain America, and Iron Man is awesome that you see in the trailers, is absolutely awesome. The action throughout the film is consistently good. And even that action sequence that you see in the trailers where Captain America is chasing Black Panther, who's chasing Winter Soldier. Amazing. All the action sequences are great in this movie. All right, last question. This one from Tar Yank 6, and he writes, John, I've heard very little mention of Iron Man in the reviews. Downey's face acting in the trailer seems top-notch. How was he? Robert Downey Jr. was great. He's great in this movie. He really is. And I love, you know, when I was talking to Robert Downey Jr. during the whole press tour for Age of Ultron, one of the things I mentioned to him is that we really see that this Tony Stark in Age of Ultron is a very different Tony Stark now than the Tony Stark we saw in that first Iron Man. His character continues to evolve, and they continue that evolution into Captain America Civil War. You see in Tony, and this is brought beautifully by Robert Downey Jr., the effects and the toll that all the previous Iron Man and Avengers films have had on him, and they've brought him to a point now that he's still Tony Stark, but he's a different version of Tony Stark now than he was, as he would be for a guy who's gone through everything he has gone through. So yes, absolute top-notch. Believe me, Chris Evans, Chadwick Boseman, and absolutely Robert Downey Jr., Scarlett Johansson, Sebastian Stan, Paul Rudd, Anthony Mackie, they're all great. They're all great in this movie. I love it. So judgment time. I'm going to give this movie a score. You guys might have heard me talk about this before, but I give Captain America Civil War. And remember, I don't hand out super high scores very often. I give it a 9 out of 10. Like a beautiful, perfectly solid 9 out of 10. I love this movie. I think you will really enjoy this movie. The last time I checked, this might have changed, but the last time I checked, Civil War is holding 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I mean, there you go. And I think you're going to love it. I cannot wait for you guys to see it. Anyway, that'll do it for my review of Captain America Civil War. Thanks so much for joining me. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just go up there and click on subscribe. And by the way, hop on iTunes and subscribe to my podcast, the John Campea Podcast as well. Follow me on Facebook and on Twitter at John Campea. And don't forget, my brand new show starting up on the Comic-Con HQ network is coming in May. Head on over to comicconhq.com and sign up for your free, I think it's like 3 or 4 month free trial subscription to Comic-Con HQ. Go and do that right now. So that'll do it for me, guys. Thanks a lot for joining me. My name is John Campea.